Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is U.S. Immigration Attorney Hardam Tripathi from Trip Law. Today we're going to be discussing a very important component of the E-2 visa. This is called source of funds. As many of you listening in today, you are very sophisticated investors. You have already become successful in your home country, and you are basically trying to find out ways to utilize your business acumen and ultimately come to these great United States of America to do a wonderful job here to grow your business, get a return on that investment and the risk that you're taking, and ultimately hire a good law firm or an attorney such as myself who is there to take you along the way. So when you're applying for an E-2 visa, it's a treaty-based country. We have other videos on that. But once you do realize that there is this source of funds requirement, there's a lot of planning that needs to be done on your end as that immigrant. And so as a professional, as a sophisticated investor, such as yourselves viewing in today, you're going to have to work not only on the business side, but you're actually going to have to work on the side of the law and immigration law specifically as it relates to E-2s and source of funds. So what is a source of funds? What does that requirement from an E-2 perspective mean to you as that treaty investor? And how will it give you the best opportunity to obtain a favorable outcome on your case? Well, here's what we do here at Trip Law. We want to make sure that your source of funds are very well documented, that they're very well transcribed into the actual application, whether it be through legal status here in the United States through USCIS or through the embassy in your home country where you're actually going to have to go to an interview with your spouse and any unmarried child under the age of 21 with specific age barriers and things of that nature. But before we get into that, what is source of funds, right? And if we really look at source of funds are the meat and potatoes of your case. It's actually a way to show that the money that you're actually bringing into the United States comes from a legal source or a legal source of funds. And so when you look at that, the government's really looking at two things. They're really looking at whether he or she, is possessing and controlling the capital, the money that you're bringing into the country in your E-2 business, is actually invested within an operating account here in these great United States. Now, when they do that, it's very important to understand that the investor has to explain where that money came from, and that is what the source of funds is. What is the source of the funds that you're investing from your home country into the United States? So what the government's going to look at really, and this was something that was imposed by the government, this was something that the government really wanted to look at because they wanted to make sure that the money that was coming in did not come from any criminal activity. It wasn't black money. It didn't come from black markets. These were legal, legitimate source of funds based on what you or your loved ones or partners, friends did in that home country. Where did that money come from? How did it go from that person to you as the initial investor, the principal applicant? And this will affect your spouse and the derivative beneficiaries that will be on your application. So it's really important to understand what is source of funds. And that's basically going back to that you possess and control the actual capital that is coming from that third country into the United States. So, this seems like a very simple requirement at a first glance, right? Kind of like at a first, kind of overview, but it's actually more complicated than that. There's a lot of documentary requirements, and there's certain types of source of funds that are very important when it comes to you investing that money into the United States, specifically within your E-2 business. So today in this video, we're going to talk about what type of sources or what types of source of funds are actually valid in the eyes of USCIS or the embassy at the U.S. Embassy in your home country, and then what are the types of evidence per type of source is actually required for you to ultimately have the best chance of getting this case approved through your counsel at Trip Law. And that's why we're really going into this nugget of information today to talk about what are the 7 source of funds that we commonly see and what are the documentary evidence required to fulfill those requirements for those specific sources. So the 7 different sources, it's very important to understand the 7 different sources, but we're going to break it up one by one. The first source is from personal savings that you may have as that individual, and this could be from income that you've derived in the home country. So these are things like wages, maybe you own certain income that is your personal income that you've saved up on over a vast period of time. And it's very important that you use this source because that's going to be legal most of the time because you're obviously doing everything legally, you're working very hard in your country, and you have these personal source of funds. These are funds that are like your savings from the income that you have generated by either running your business overseas or actually saving up on jobs that you may have had prior to this investment business opportunity. So one really interesting thing is when you have source of funds coming from personal savings account from income that you have generated in the home country, the government's actually going to require certain documentary evidence that's we as the lawyers and working hand in hand with you as our partners. Remember, we're all working together as a team to make sure you have the best outcome, not only for you and your business, but for your family. Family is very important in these regards. And so the government is going to ask specific documents about your personal savings, your actual wages earned, that you're now bringing in from that home country to now the United States of America. So certain sorts of documents that you will be needing will be tax returns. You're going to have to show pay records. You're going to have to show savings that you've accumulated throughout your breadth of your experience and professional experience. And you're going to have to show where is that source coming from. And the best way to do it is we personally at Trip Law usually ask for these tax documents, your personal tax returns showing that you ultimately have made this money, you've paid taxes on that money in your home country, and that this is a legitimate source of funds that's backed by all the background checks you'll go through involving that. So it's very important that you get these investment funds confirmed through your personal records via tax records. And so generally what we usually like to do is we usually look at 3 years of tax returns prior to the investment. So it's very important because ultimately these 3 years show a trend. It shows a consistency of your personal funds that you have earned, and it shows a track record of you paying taxes on those funds legally in your home country. One really cool thing though here at our firm is if let's say you have less than 3 years, then we'll provide the 2 or 1 years, but we'll back it up with affidavits, we'll back it up with earnings that show that there was a substantial amount of earnings in those 1 to 2 years, and that is just as important with respect to your case. Now, in some cases, what the government's going to do is they're going to ask for more information. That's where the request for evidence comes in, the RFE. And ultimately, at that time, they're going to want to know specifically within that 3-year tax period where that individual year's monies come from. So you're going to have employee letters, you're going to have pay stubs, you're going to have specific things that are going to be incorporated within that tax year that we will help you gather and ultimately submit to USCIS if you're obtaining legal status, if you're already here on a valid visa, or through the embassy if you're applying through consular processing overseas. So basically what they're going to want is they're going to want to see bank statements, they're going to want to see how the money was spent, they want to see the deposits that your business has done. The accumulation of funds over a period of time is very important because ultimately you could say that you've had this done legally, and we all understand that we all work very hard in a business, but at the end of the day, the government wants everything to be backed up by ultimately evidence, and it's all what you can prove, what has been documented. If you didn't document it, it didn't happen, right? So showing the origin of where the deposit came from is very important in this regard when it comes to personal savings. So USCIS will ask for those proofs. They're going to ask how those accumulation of funds happened over time, and we at Trip Law will help you. So now we just discussed number 1 out of 7, the type of source and what documents will be required, and this was personal savings. Now we're going to segue into loans. Loans are another way that we've seen a lot of very business professionals come in as immigrants and invest a lot of their hard-earned money into the United States, into their E2 franchise business. And what's really interesting about loans is they have a very unique area, right? And loans are important. You can actually take a loan from a bank or a financial institution or a loan from a friend or a family member, but then that loan has to come from a way where you can prove that that loan, that money that was loaned, actually also came from a legitimate source of funds. So let's say in this regard, you're a business owner and we get a lot of these from Mexico, Canada, UK, a lot of these E2 countries where people will basically get loans from a financial institution or a bank. And what we would need at that time is a promissory note, or we would need any agreements or loan agreements or contracts stating that you depend on this financial institution for the loan, but you plan on paying them back. It's going to be a contract. It's going to be in writing with your informed consent. So very important that we get those bank documents from your bank provider, your financial institution provider, and ultimately supporting that loan, because that's what the government's going to ask. USCIS or the embassy is going to say, well, how did you get this loan? How did the bank transfer actually occur? These are all very important elements of your case that we as your counsel will make sure we incorporate into the application. Furthermore, if the loan is from not a financial institution, but let's say it's from a friend or a individual, we get a lot of cases where we get hardworking people who want to invest, but then they want to request a loan from their loved ones, and this person then gives them the loan because they trust this person. And ultimately what will end up happening is then there has to be an assessment that the government's going to take, and they're going to look at how did that person who loaned you the money obtain their funds. Furthermore, when they did send you the monies, did you have a contract in place to pay them back? How did it go from that person's bank account to your bank account, and were there contractual documents that were actually backed up? So once we determine where the funds actually came from, and we look at who actually gave the loan, and we have to provide all their documents, the government's going to take all that in a totality of circumstances and really look at everything together wholeheartedly to find out where that money came from. And so the documents we would have to, just as a catch-all, what we would need is we would need to see bank statements going from the person who originally gave the loan to you, the immigrant taking the loan, bank statements showing the loan being actually transferred from that third party that you trust and that they trust you into the business bank account of your bank account as the immigrant. So loans that are secured against a company or company assets can't usually be counted towards the E2 investment. So I just wanted to put that out there, but these are conversations that we would have at the initial consultation when we look at the loan aspect of it. So that's your second source of fund. It's called a loan. Just like your personal savings, you can also get a loan, and these are the documents you would need for that. Now we're going to segue into the third type of source that you can utilize to fund your company and the good efforts you do to basically get a return on your investment. This is called a gift. A gift is something exactly how it sounds. Think about like Christmas or a birthday or something of that nature where someone's handing you a gift. Well, in this regard, someone is actually giving you a gift of funds. It's a source of funds. And we have to now know that the person who gifted it to you, where is that money coming from? And the government's going to ask that at USCIS or the embassy. So we have to basically describe the gift. We need a contract or something, some sort of document highlighting the gift. You don't have to owe that money back. It's not really a contract per se in that regard, but contract in terms of consideration that you actually got a gift that helped you out. And we got to make sure that the person and the relationship that you have with that person is a bona fide type relationship. So a lot of that, the person actually giving the gift has to provide the same information that you as the investor would have to provide. So instead of now you, the investor, having to provide all those documents, we will take some documents from you, but we also have to show the person who provided the gift all their documents, showing how did they get that money to give you that amount of gift. Did they sell a home? Did they sell assets in the stock market? Were there certain situations going on where how did they get the money, and how did they have enough money to actually provide that gift to you, the investor, who's the immigrant and the principal applicant applying for your case. So very important area. That's the third source that we really utilize a lot as well, because in certain countries, gifts are very commonplace, and culturally and from a heritage-based perspective, this is common practice in a lot of countries such as Bangladesh and things of that nature. So if you're listening in, a gift is another great source of funds, and these are the documents that will be required. Now the fourth type of source that we would look at would be sales of property. You may own a home, you may own a condo, an apartment complex, or any sort of real estate property, and now it's up to you to show that yes, you sold that home, you sold that property, and through that property, that was your source of funds. That was the money that you received that you can now invest. Maybe you're a wealthy investor overseas and you sold a commercial property as a business person, or maybe you sold personal property. And guess what? That sale of property you can now use. But in order to do that, you do have to provide the source of funds, the evidentiary documents that USCIS or the embassy is going to take into account. So this would be documents showing that the investor-owned property was ultimately sold, and ultimately the money came. So bank statements, account statements, we would need to show a deed or a mortgage or a statement, something that is by the financial institution or from your personal records showing that you own title to that property. So we have to show the recording of the sale of the property. We have to show that the records were actually showing that the money was ultimately received in your account and then transferred over. And then finally, you have to show that, if it was recently purchased, then the government, could request information. Usually in these RFE situations with request for evidence, they can actually show, a request where you then have to show where the money came from to buy that property. So you kind of go down this rabbit hole, but we'll help you through that. So sale of property is another great source. Now we go into the fifth source. This is insurance. Insurance or court settlements that you may have where you've earned a lot of money. And in that regard, you're able to then move that money over to your business here in the United States. Well, Obviously, USCIS and the embassy is going to want documents showing that court settlement or those insurance documents, showing that you had a certain stake, that you paid for those insurance privileges, that you did have court documents highlighting that the money was actually transferred. So this is where you have court documents showing ultimately a judgment by a judge or by the court. Ultimately, or on the insurance side, you're going to want documents showing the entitlement to that insurance policy, and ultimately showing the bank transfer documents that result as of the sale of that insurance proceeds or from the actual court settlement itself. So this is a very unique area of law which we would be happy to walk you through, but you could use insurance proceeds or ultimately insurance settlements and things of that nature to ultimately drive the source to show that the money is transferred. Now we're going to go into the sixth source. It's called inheritance. What if you are someone who's inherited money? You know, your father passed away, your mother passed away, unfortunately, but you ended up getting a lot of money as a result of that. Well, we would need probate documents from the court in your home country showing that the funds were then sent from the estate of that deceased person into your based on a will or based on a trust or whatever account, and you ended up inheriting this money. And once you inherit it, then we would have to show those probate documents and the fund transfer documents, and your attorney in that home country will work with them to make sure we do get that in, and we provide that as a result to the government so you can have a better outcome on your case. And then finally, we're looking at company profits, right? I get a lot of companies who will do their E-2s, and they've already had money from other companies or other businesses that they've actually went ahead and made profits on. Well, guess what? You can actually use company profits. So maybe you as the investor own the company, right? You at that point can show the source of funds through those investment funds that you've already invested in from another business or another enterprise. And ultimately, we're going to need all your corporate documents, right? We're going to need corporate documentation. These are financial corporate documents that are going to include audited financial statements. We're going to have to see your articles of incorporation, any corporate tax returns that you may have filed in your home country. Maybe you already have another partnership-based business here in the United States. So what the government's really looking at is really profitability of that previous business and where those funds came from, and then showing that those funds from that specific business was then transferred based on the company profits that you made from that third company into your operating account here in the United States. So it's mainly about profitability and legitimacy, that the business came from an area in your home country where you did make profits and it was legitimate and the money you made was legitimate. So at the end of the day, you have all the financial documents available, and we would then utilize those to shape your plan with respect to the government here in the United States. So how the funds were distributed is also going to be pretty important. You could have had gifts, loans, dividends, salaries, bonuses that you may have paid out to your staff. All these things we take into consideration. So the whole key theme to all this, if you can tell by this video, is that first know which source your money is coming from, so you have the money to actually invest in the E2 business here in the United States, but also make sure that you're providing enough documentary evidence that shows that these funds were legitimate, that they did not come from the black market or from black money, but rather it's a clear snapshot basically of how the money was earned, how it was then transferred, and how it ultimately ended up into your U.S. operating account. And ultimately what they're going to do is the government's going to look at all that from a step-by-step, from an account-by-account approach. We usually break that down for our clients based on each account, and we're here to help you navigate basically these 7 major sources that we usually see as a trend in our practice, and what we can do to help you get the best return and the best opportunity to have a favorable outcome with respect to your E2 case. So today we talked about what is a source of funds. We talked about what are the 7 major types of sources, and for each of those 7 types we delved into what are the separate documentary requirements that will be required to prove to the government that these source of funds were legitimate, and indeed that you're using those to then grow your business here in the United States. So ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate you listening in. You've already been successful in your home country. That's why you're really trying to bring that success here to the United States. Our job here is to help you, guide you through the complicated and bureaucratic process with the State Department and the USCIS involving source of funds. And our whole goal is we can sit in a consult, walk you through your case facts, and ultimately decide what is the best option for you. So thank you so much for your time. We wish you the best with your E2 journey. And if you have any questions, please feel free to give us a call at 863-370-2427. And also, please feel free to like and subscribe, as we are trying to help further growth in these great United States. And it all starts with you, the E2 investor. So thank you so much. We wish you the best of luck. This is U.S. immigration attorney Hardam Tripathi from Trip Law, and God bless you. Thank you. Have a great day.